The Galactic Concord was a delicate arrangement, one the Larvok Empire viewed as a mere inconvenience. Their fleets dominated the stars with brute force, coercing submission from weaker civilizations. To the Larvok, humans were an upstart species, bold, reckless, and annoyingly principled. For years, the human alliance had endured insults and provocations, preferring diplomacy to conflict. But the Larvok misread this restraint as weakness, setting the stage for their greatest miscalculation. The first blow came in the form of fire and ash. A convoy of human trade vessels, escorted by 2 modest frigates, traversed the neutral sector between human and Larvok territories. It was a routine mission, ferrying essential supplies to frontier colonies. Without warning, Larvok warships descended, overwhelming the escorts in a brutal display of force. The attack was swift and merciless, leaving no survivors. Among the debris, a recording beacon transmitted a chilling message. The Larvok crest, blazing red against the void, accompanied by a single phrase in the guttural Larvok tongue: "Submit or perish." The footage reached Earth within hours. News networks played the grim recordings on loop, broadcasting the mangled remains of civilian ships and lifeless forms floating in the void. Public outrage ignited like wildfire. In the halls of the Human Alliance government, Ambassador Nathaniel Peterson watched the footage in silence. His jaw tightened, and his hands curled into fists. Peterson was a seasoned diplomat, known for his cool head and silver tongue, but even he felt the stirrings of anger. "They've crossed a line," Peterson said, his voice low but firm, addressing the council chamber. His dark suit and commanding presence gave him an air of authority that filled the room. Admiral Leon Grayson, a towering figure with a voice like a hammer, leaned forward. His crisp military uniform gleamed under the chamber's lights, the medals on his chest a testament to decades of service. "Ambassador," he said, his tone measured but edged with steel, "this isn't the first time the Larvok have tested us. But this is a declaration of war." Peterson shook his head, his gray eyes sharp. "A war they think we're too afraid to fight. They see our diplomacy as cowardice." "Then let's disabuse them of that notion," Grayson replied. Despite their growing anger, the council hesitated. War with the Larvok meant risking the fragile alliances humanity had built within the Galactic Concord. Peterson was tasked with delivering humanity's response. Standing before the Larvok delegation at the Concord's Grand Assembly, he spoke with measured precision. "Ambassador Reinach," Peterson began, addressing the Larvok representative, a hulking figure with scales that gleamed under the chamber's lights. "Your empire has committed an unprovoked attack against our people, slaughtering innocents and desecrating peace. We demand reparations and the withdrawal of Larvok forces from our borders. Failing that, you will face consequences." Reinach's reptilian lips curled into what could only be described as a sneer. His voice, guttural and mocking, echoed in the chamber. "Humans, always so eager to bark like predators, yet you cower like prey. We owe you nothing but extinction." The Larvok delegation erupted in laughter, a grating cacophony that reverberated through the hall. Peterson's expression remained composed, but within him, a fire raged. He returned to Earth, his report grim. It wasn't long before the Larvok escalated further. A colony on the frontier, Haven's Reach, fell under attack. The Larvok deployed shock troops, razing the settlement and massacring thousands. Survivors, few as they were, described scenes of unimaginable horror. Families torn apart, cities reduced to rubble, and Larvok warriors reveling in the chaos. The images from Haven's Reach struck a deeper chord than the convoy massacre. Humanity had been pushed beyond its breaking point. Peterson, once the staunchest advocate for diplomacy, found himself at odds with his own ideals. He stood in the Human Alliance's war room, where hollow displays projected the devastation wrought by the Larvok. "Enough," Peterson said, his voice sharp and sword. He turned to Admiral Grayson. "Prepare our fleets. If the Larvok want war, we'll show them the cost of their arrogance." Grayson gave a curt nod. It's about time. Even as plans for retaliation unfolded, Peterson couldn't shake the weight of the decision. He had spent his career believing in the power of dialogue, in the idea that words could bridge even the widest chasms. But the Larvok had shown him the limits of diplomacy. As the Council authorized the first counterattack, Peterson delivered a brief yet powerful address to the people of Earth. Standing before a live feed broadcast across the human colonies, he said, "We extended the hand of peace." The Larvok responded with blood. "Today, we stand united not as aggressors, but as defenders of our right to exist. We will show the galaxy that humanity does not cower in the face of tyranny. To the Larvok, let this be your warning. You wanted war. You will regret it." The speech galvanized human resolve, sparking a wave of unity that spread across the colonies. Soldiers volunteered in droves. Factories worked round the clock producing weapons and ships, and the fleet mobilized with a precision that astonished even veteran commanders. The stage was set. Humanity was no longer the restrained species the Larvok dismissed. They were a force awakened, ready to remind the galaxy of what they could achieve when pushed to the edge. As Peterson watched the first fleet depart, a thought lingered in his mind. Diplomacy is over. Now we fight. The war room aboard the HSS soared buzzed with activity. Holo displays cast a bluish glow across the faces of the assembled officers, each a seasoned veteran of humanity's military campaigns. At the center of it all stood Admiral Leon Grayson, his towering frame and iron will commanding the room as much as his voice. Maps of Larvok-controlled systems shimmered in the air, dotted with tactical markings denoting key enemy installations. "We've identified 3 primary targets," Grayson began, his voice cutting through the tension. "The Bastion shipyards, the Uran supply depot, and the WYRM gate, a critical Larvok staging point. Taking them out will cripple their ability to wage war." The officers exchanged grim nods. The Larvok were ruthless, but they weren't invincible. Grayson's strategy was precise and ambitious, aimed at dismantling the Larvok war machine piece by piece. Yet, it wasn't brute force that would carry the day. It was humanity's adaptability. Captain Carlos Vance leaned against the edge of the hollow table, his expression unreadable. A decorated officer with a reputation for unconventional tactics, Vance was handpicked to lead the ground operations. "Hitting all 3 targets simultaneously stretches our forces thin," he said, his voice calm yet edged with a soldier's pragmatism. "But it also forces them to spread their defenses. High risk, high reward." Grayson nodded. "That's why you're leading the strike on the Bastion shipyards. If anyone can pull this off, it's you." Vance smirked faintly, his confidence unwavering. "Then let's make sure they regret ever picking this fight." The sword emerged from slipspace near the Bastion shipyards, its sleek hull cutting through the void like a blade. Alongside it were the HSS Vanguard and HSS Indomitable, 2 of humanity's most advanced warships. The task force wasted no time, launching a barrage of torpedoes that streaked toward the shipyards. Explosions blossomed in the darkness, tearing through Larvok defenses with surgical precision. Inside the sword, Grayson watched the assault unfold on the main display. The Larvok fleet scrambled to respond, their ships moving with the brute strength but predictable tactics that humans had come to expect. "Hold the line," Grayson ordered. "Let them come to us." As the space battle raged, Vance and his strike team deployed aboard stealth transports. Their target was the central command hub of the shipyards, a heavily fortified structure bristling with defenses. Vance led his team with the precision of a seasoned commander, their black armor blending seamlessly with the shadows. The first encounter came swiftly. A squad of Larvok guards, hulking figures clad in spiked armor, patrolled the corridors. Vance signaled his men, and in a flurry of suppressed fire and blade strikes, the guards fell silently. "Clear," Vance whispered, his voice crackling softly in the calms. They advanced deeper into the complex, planting charges at key structural points. The Larvok, caught off guard by the audacity of the attack, scrambled to reinforce their positions. When they finally engaged the humans, it was too late. The charges detonated in a cascade of fire and steel, collapsing the shipyard's infrastructure and dooming the unfinished ships within. Back in space, the Larvok fleet found themselves outmaneuvered. Grayson's task force delivered punishing strikes, exploiting every weakness in their formation. By the time the Larvok attempted to retreat, their losses were catastrophic. The Bastion shipyards were no more, and humanity had sent a clear message. They were not to be underestimated. News of the victory spread quickly. Across human colonies, cheers erupted as civilians celebrated the first major blow against the Larvok Empire. Yet, amidst the triumph, Peterson remained somber. From the command deck of the Sword, he reviewed footage from the raid, his gaze lingering on the faces of fallen soldiers. "Victory comes at a cost," he murmured. Grayson approached his toned sword. "And it's a cost we'll bear if it means protecting our people. The Larvok don't understand restraint. They only respect strength." Peterson nodded, though his expression remained troubled. "Then we'll make sure they never forget this day." The campaign continued with unrelenting ferocity. Humanity's forces struck the Uran supply depot next, targeting the lifeline of the Larvok's frontline armies. Vance once again led the ground assault, employing diversionary tactics to sow chaos among the defenders. Meanwhile, Grayson's fleet executed precise bombardments that left no room for retaliation. The WYRM Gate, a massive slip-space nexus, posed the greatest challenge. It was heavily defended, with layers of mines and sentry drones protecting it. Grayson devised a bold maneuver, deploying decoy fleets to draw away the defenders while the main force moved in for the kill. As the humans breached the gate's defenses, the Larvok realized too late that they were outmatched. The gate was destroyed in a brilliant explosion, cutting off key supply lines and isolating Larvok forces across the sector. With each victory, fear spread among the Larvok. Reports of human ingenuity and ferocity circulated like wildfire, demoralizing their troops. For the first time in generations, the Larvok Empire faced an enemy they couldn't bully into submission. "They'll come back harder," Vance said, his tone cautious. "Desperation makes for dangerous enemies." "Let them," Grayson replied, his voice like granite. "We've only just begun." As the fleet prepared for the next phase of the campaign, Peterson watched from the observation deck, the stars stretching endlessly before him. The Larvok wanted war, he thought. Now they'll learn what that truly means. "We underestimated them," Karthak growled, his voice resonating like grinding stone. His golden eyes surveyed his council, filled with fear and confusion. "Humans are not prey. They are predators, ruthless and cunning." A general, his warplate dulled with scars, slammed a clawed fist onto the table. "Then we must retaliate with full force. Deploy the Leviathan fleet and burn their colonies to ash." Karthak's gaze hardened. "The Leviathan fleet lies in shambles. Our ships are scattered, our supply lines severed. Retaliation without resources is suicide." The room fell silent, the weight of his words undeniable. For the first time in generations, the Larvok faced a foe they could not crush. Karthak's claws tapped against the table, his thoughts turning to the unthinkable. "We must seek peace." The murmurs of protest were immediate. For a species bred on conquest, the notion of diplomacy was anathema. Yet, the facts were undeniable. The humans had forced their hand. Karthak turned to Envoy Calter, a seasoned negotiator whose cunning had salvaged the Larvok from diplomatic disasters before. The envoy's dark, calculating eyes met the sovereign's. "Do you believe these humans will listen, High Sovereign?" "They must," Karthak said, though the doubt in his voice betrayed him. "Offer them reparations, land, wealth, whatever it takes to end this war before they reach our homeworld." Within days, Envoy Calter arrived at the neutral grounds of the Galactic Concord. The once proud Larvok diplomat now walked with an air of caution, his ornate robes a faint echo of his empire's fading glory. Across the chamber stood Ambassador Nathaniel Peterson, his tall, sharp figure radiating quiet authority. Peterson had been humanity's voice of peace for years, but his resolve had hardened through this war. Calther approached the table with deliberate steps, his reptilian face contorted into what passed for humility among his kind. "Ambassador Peterson," he began, his tone carefully measured, "I come on behalf of the High Sovereign to propose terms of peace." Peterson regarded him with a steely gaze. The scars of the war, the shattered colonies, the massacred innocents, flashed through his mind. His voice was calm but cold. "Terms of peace? Now you seek peace, after provoking war and slaughtering thousands of my people." "The High Sovereign recognizes the miscalculation," Calther said, the words clearly bitter on his tongue. "We are prepared to offer reparations, territories, trade agreements, a lasting truce between our peoples." For a moment, Peterson said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then he stood, his hands resting on the table. His voice carried the weight of humanity's fury. "Reparations," he said, the word dripping with disdain. "You think land and credits will bring back the dead? You think treaties will erase the horrors you unleashed?" Calther hesitated, his reptilian pupils narrowing. "Ambassador, we—" "No," Peterson interrupted, his voice rising. "You wanted war, envoy. You sought to make humanity cower. And now that we've shown you the price of your arrogance, you crawl here offering scraps. This isn't peace. It's desperation." Calther recoiled slightly, but pressed on. "If this war continues, it will only bring ruin to us both. Surely you can see the wisdom in ending the bloodshed." Peterson leaned forward, his tone like ice. "The time for wisdom was before your empire butchered innocents. Now, the only terms we offer are unconditional surrender." The declaration sent a chill through the chamber. Calther's composure faltered, and for a moment he looked truly afraid. "You mean to annihilate us?" Peterson straightened, his expression unyielding. "We mean to ensure the Larvok Empire will never again threaten another species. Peace cannot exist without justice, and justice demands you answer for your crimes." The envoy's pleas continued, but Peterson's resolve was unshakable. When Calther finally departed, he carried with him humanity's refusal, a message that no terms could repair the damage done. Back aboard the HSS Sword, Admiral Grayson met Peterson in the observation deck, where the vastness of space stretched before them. "They sent a peace envoy," Grayson said, his tone neutral. "They offered reparations," Peterson replied, his voice heavy with disdain. Grayson snorted. "I take it you weren't swayed." "They didn't come for peace," Peterson said, his jaw tightening. "They came for mercy, and after what they've done, they deserve none." Grayson nodded approvingly. "Then it's time to finish this. We've broken their fleets, dismantled their supply lines. All that remains is to strike at their heart." Peterson turned to the Admiral, his expression somber but soared. "Ensure the Larvok Empire remembers this lesson, Admiral. Not just for a year or a generation, but for all time." Grayson saluted and departed to prepare the final assault. Peterson lingered, staring into the void. He felt the weight of his decisions pressing down on him, but he knew they were necessary. The Larvok had shown no mercy in their provocations. Humanity had learned the hard way that peace without strength was an illusion. As the Sword prepared to lead the charge toward the Larvok homeworld, Peterson uttered a final thought to himself. They wanted peace on their terms. Now they'll see what peace on ours truly means. The Larvok homeworld, Virak Prime, loomed beneath the fleet of human warships like a wounded predator surrounded by hunters. Once the heart of an empire that ruled through fear and conquest, it now stood defenseless, its orbital defenses shattered and fleets decimated. The humans had come not as invaders, but as judges, delivering the reckoning the Larvok had forced upon themselves. Admiral Leon Grayson stood on the bridge of the HSS Sword, his steely gaze fixed on the planet below. Around him, the crew worked with a focused calm, the gravity of their mission etched into every movement. "Fleet status?" he asked, his voice steady. "All units report ready, sir," replied Commander Jules Renner, a sharp-eyed officer whose efficiency had earned her Grayson's trust. "We've established full orbital dominance. The Larvok have no ships left to oppose us." Grayson gave a single nod. "Then we proceed." In the war room, Ambassador Nathaniel Peterson stood before a holographic image of High Sovereign Karthak. The Larvok leader's once imposing presence was diminished. His scales dulled and his shoulders slumped under the weight of his empire's ruin. Peterson's face remained impassive, his voice unyielding as he addressed the defeated ruler. "High Sovereign Karthak," Peterson began, his tone measured but unrelenting. "You summoned this war with your arrogance and cruelty. You thought humanity weak. You were wrong. Now, your empire lies in ruins, your fleet scattered, your people terrified. This is the cost of your hubris." Karthak's golden eyes flickered with a mixture of rage and despair. "We sought to expand our dominion, to secure our survival. Your kind, your defiance, threatened the balance of power." Peterson's expression hardened. "The only thing humanity threatened was your unchecked tyranny. You slaughtered innocents, raised colonies, and sought to break us. You failed. And now, you will face the consequences." Grayson entered the room, his presence adding weight to the already tense atmosphere. He addressed Peterson, his voice low but firm. "The fleet is prepared. Say the word, and we'll execute the final strike." Karthak flinched, the realization dawning that his once unstoppable empire was at the mercy of those he had dismissed as prey. "What do you want?" he demanded, his voice trembling with a mixture of desperation and defiance. "Land? Tribute? What will satisfy your bloodlust?" Peterson's lips curled into a grim smile. "Humanity does not seek conquest or wealth. What we want is accountability." He stepped closer to the holographic image, his gray eyes piercing. "Your empire will dissolve. Your armies will disband. Your people will no longer rule through fear, but instead learn the price of peace through humility. The Galactic Concord will oversee the redistribution of your territories to those you've oppressed. And you, High Sovereign, will answer for your crimes in a tribunal." The Larvok leader's claws scraped against the edge of his seat, his pride clashing with the inevitability of his defeat. "And if we refuse?" Grayson stepped forward, his tone cold as steel. "Then Virak Prime will burn, and your species will join the countless others you sought to annihilate." Karthak glared at the human leaders, his pride a flickering ember in the face of their resolve. After a long, tense silence, he lowered his gaze. "Very well," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "We surrender." The transmission ended, leaving Peterson and Grayson alone in the war room. Peterson turned to the Admiral, his expression unreadable. "It's done," he said, though there was no triumph in his voice. Grayson regarded him with a steady gaze. "You don't sound relieved." "Because this isn't relief," Peterson replied. "It's justice. And justice, Admiral, is rarely clean." The consequences of the Larvok's surrender rippled across the galaxy. In the days that followed, the human alliance worked alongside the Galactic Concord to dismantle the remnants of the Larvok Empire. Entire planets once ruled by the Larvok were freed, their peoples rejoicing at the collapse of their oppressors. On Virak Prime, Peterson stood in the shattered remains of the Sovereign Chamber, where statues of Larvok dominance had been reduced to rubble. He watched as Larvok soldiers, once towering figures of terror, laid down their weapons and submitted to Concord forces. "Do you think they'll learn from this?" asked Grayson, standing beside him. "They'll have no choice," Peterson replied. "We've ensured they won't forget." Despite the overwhelming victory, the cost of the war lingered heavily. Thousands of human lives had been lost, and the scars of the Larvok's atrocities would not soon fade. Peterson knew that humanity's strength had sent a message to the galaxy, but he also understood the weight of their newfound reputation. As Peterson and Grayson prepared to depart, a Concord representative approached them. "The tribunal for High Sovereign Carthac is scheduled," the envoy said. "Will you attend?" "No," Peterson replied, his voice firm. "We've done our part. Let the galaxy judge him now." Grayson nodded in agreement. "Our mission was never vengeance. It was to ensure the safety of humanity and its allies." Back aboard the Sword, Peterson stood on the observation deck, watching Virac Prime shrink into the distance. The war had ended, but the echoes of its lessons would resonate for generations. Humanity had proven its strength, not just through its military might, but through its resolve to stand against tyranny and demand accountability. As the stars stretched before him, Peterson allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. The Larvok had underestimated humanity, believing them weak and complacent. They had learned otherwise, and the galaxy had witnessed the consequences. "We're not conquerors," Peterson said to himself, his voice barely audible. "But we are survivors, and we will never be provoked again.